All right, good morning. Good morning. We are here. Had another start and stop, fits and start on NEM. I hope you found us. I feel so bad. I, I, it's technology surprise each week, but it doesn't matter. I'm here now. I see a couple of you have found us and refound us, and today is your day. Today is my day. The greatest place you can be on the internet. I believe it with all my heart is right here, right now. I said, that's so arrogant. How could you say that? That doesn't matter. Well, listen, if I didn't believe that, I'd be someplace else on the internet. Of course I believe this is where just the love of God is coming forth, because I want to be where the love of God is coming forth. And so I'm excited to be here. I'm excited to have you here today. Again, forgive us for the technology glitches this morning, but we are up. We are here. I can see and hear me. I don't know if you can see and hear me. Kenobi has been completely silent until that very moment, now that we're actually up and going. But I'm so grateful to have you on with us today. Let's pray. Lord, I thank you for your peace, for your light, for your love, for the entrance of your word bringing light today. And just speak through me, think through me. I decrease so that you may increase. I yield myself to you. God, that something of your good, that something of your mind would come forth today, and that it would not just be a message, but it would be the mind behind the message, Lord. That ears are anointed, hearts are good ground. Minister to us, spirit, soul, body, family, in every sphere. Minister to us today. We look to you. We lift up our eyes to the hills. No weapon formed against this time shall prosper. I thank you for transformation from inside to out as we step deeper into your big truth and into your big story. I bless all those listening live and via replay in Jesus' name. And all that agree with those words say amen. Okay, let's get into it today. Moving along very quickly, I've got a place that I want to get part A of this out to you today, and then we'll pick up a little bit more, in the coming weeks. But I'm going to start with the scripture. I don't really like starting with scripture necessarily. Some things have changed in my life, and I've kind of the way I've always ministered. I mean, almost always for 30-something years is, take a text and then kind of as an anchor text and go. And of course, now there's just maybe a larger idea, larger perspective, depending on what audience that you're trying to bring truth to. But John 1. Let's just look at John 1. In the beginning was the Word. Was the mind, source, order of the cosmos, the sans cosmic, transcosmic mind. We call that God. The same was in the beginning with God, verse 2, verse 3. All things were made by God, right? And without God was not anything made that was made. And in God was life, and that life, that divine spark lit all human beings, and that light shined into the chaos of darkness, and the darkness, couldn't contain or couldn't squash it. Then it goes on in verse 6. Verse 7 and verse 8, talking about the prophet sent to try to testify of that divine light that was coming as the incarnation of God. Verse 10, and so now God is in the world, and the world was made by God, and the world did not recognize God. There, God came to his creation. God came to God's creation, and creation, the very material world that came out of God, it says, verse 11, did not receive him. But to as many as received him, they now receive that awakening, that transformative power to initiate, propel, and advance the process of taking on and bearing. When it says power to become the sons of God, it's talking about the awakening to now embody the very image and likeness of God. In which they had been made. Moving on down, they were born not of the flesh. They're related to God not because of their tribal or national heritage, but because of their connection to the divine mind. Verse 14, and the Word, right? This cosmic mind, source, order by which all that we know came about, took on human form and dwelt among us. They're testifying. And we saw the glory as of the only incarnate manifestation, as of the only human manifestation of God. Verse 15, John talked about him being the voice of one crying in the wilderness. John said, hey, he's coming and he's here, God, the manifestation, the kingdom of God, the not yet world is dwelling among us. And we look at verse 18 again, where it says, no man has seen God at any time, but this incarnation of God, who we call Jesus, this word made flesh, this divine mind of God made in human form, that which is in the bosom of the Father, that has revealed God to humanity. So that's where we're starting today, and I just kind of gonna give you this. Let's look for a title, if you could, on the screen here, Mikey. A title: "Finding Your Story Within the Story," and that's where I want to kind of get today. And just catch me as best you can. Olivia's and Connie are on the notes. We're going to feed them out to you. And, of course, again, through this Facebook small group, we give out the notes every week, and those are helpful, certainly, to those who are pursuing this thing. So here it is. A cosmic, and I say these things, people say, Pastor Mike, I've been listening to you for 20 years. When you start talking this cosmic stuff, it's weird. I just mean all of the creation, right? The universe, the multiverse, the omniverse, everything that is, right? The heart of everything that is. A cosmic redemptive arc rests at the core of the incarnational narrative. I'll kind of put it to you this way. You can imagine kind of that there's an origin, right? We talk about an origin story on the screen here. And that origin story is leading somewhere. And where it's leading to, well, I need to really redo that. It's really this. It's an alpha love origin story that is working along a redemptive arc that's going to end in an omega of love. And there's a redemptive arc. What I mean by redemptive arc, that the world, the cosmos, is not going to remain forever in the chaos that we've known it, or in the chaos, in the context of the chaos which we've known it. But there is a redemptive arc that our faith is that the universe, the cosmos, humanity, creation, whatever, is heading towards a place, and it's not just flotsam and jetsam, willy-nilly out here in the middle of nowhere, but all of humanity, all of the human story, all of the cosmic story is going to a place, and that place is good. Therefore, we get the idea of redemptive, right? Redemptive. Or we might say ordo ab chao, right? How do you spell chao, Bug? C-H-A-O? Okay, so we're just going to call it that. Order ab chao. What is order ab chao? We're getting order ab from chaos, right? So the redemptive. So the whole point of the narrative of Genesis is that the world is without form and void, and then there's a human being put and replenish the earth, and bring order out of the chaos. The whole point of Abraham is, the whole point of Noah, everybody's messed up, and we've got to get things back on track, so we're going to have Noah. The whole point of Abraham is everybody's worshiping idols and a false god, but we're going to bring it. The whole point of Moses is there's chaos and there's oppression of God's people, and people are trying to keep the true heart of God and the light of God down, so we're going to bring a law, right? And so there's a redemptive arc. And at the heart of the gospel narrative, thanks, Mikey, at the heart of the gospel narrative is a redemptive arc, is this idea that this story of God, the Word became flesh and dwelt among us, and nobody had ever seen God at any time, but when you saw Jesus, when you saw Christ, I guess, you saw God, that has that redemptive arc. Look at my little screen here. I realized I made a St. Patrick's Day thing, which I didn't realize, but listen, the Lord works in mysterious ways. I'm just a vessel, right? So catch this, and somebody say, you're kind of all over the place. I'm really not. I'm trying to get these massive ideas to you. As with all religions in your notes, or all God concepts, whether they're sourced from fact, legend, co-option, embellishment, exaggeration, or otherwise. Now, this is an important thing, that the gospel story, the story of God coming to humanity and revealing God's true nature and likeness, right? That whether that's fact, or whether it's just legend, or whether it's co-option, whether it's one story that existed that was kind of co-opted and made to another story, whether it's embellishment, okay, well, there really was a Jesus, and, they kind of did some things, but they big fished it, that kind of a deal. Maybe it's exaggerated. Maybe, okay, there was a couple of miracles, but it really wasn't the whole country. Whatever it is, the mythos in your notes, the underlying narrative idea beneath what happens in John, what happens in Matthew and Mark, what happens in Genesis through Revelation, what happens in all religious narratives, right? The mythos behind it, the mythos beneath it, the mythos through it, that there's a narrative, there's a story of Abraham, there's a story of David, there's a story of Moses, there's a story of Noah, there's a story of Adam and Eve. But in those stories, whether those stories are factual or not, Is it a literal Adam, a scientific Adam, a mythical Adam? It doesn't matter. Is it an embellishment of Noah? Is it a real story, a Jewish story, a story that's placed in the right place in the scriptures? Or is it pre all that? Is it a story of all humanity being colonized by an ark planted on the earth to redeem the ark? Is that, I mean, whatever it is, it doesn't matter if it's legend. It doesn't matter if it's fact. It doesn't matter if it's embellishment or exaggeration. That's not the point. The point is that within that story, beneath that story, above that story, around that story, through that story, flows what? Flows a universal good. That there's a mythos behind the religious myths, beneath the religious myths. And when I say myth, I don't mean that as insulting. So, well, you're saying it's a myth. No, I'm not suggesting for this that Jesus of Nazareth is a myth. I'm not suggesting that the historical Jesus, the biblical Jesus, the colonized Jesus, the fairy tale Jesus. I'm not making commentary on whether or not that is fact or legend or embellishment or exaggeration or actual. That's not the point. But that story, whether there's a literal Moses or not, a literal David or not, whether the children of Israel were actually in slavery in Egypt, whether there really was that's immaterial to the larger truth. What is the larger truth? That behind, through the Hindu narratives, or the Buddhist narratives, or the indigenous land religions. I mean, natural religion, nature religions. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if there was really a frog king, and if there was really this, and if there was really a whale, and if there was really the volcanoes were made by a goddess. It doesn't matter. What matters is that if you pay attention to the story, whether that story is factual, legend, embellishment, co-option, exaggerate, doesn't matter. If you pay attention, if you listen to that which runs through it, that which runs beneath it, that which runs above and around it, you are hearing and catching, kind of holding your finger up or hoisting your sail toward something of the divine mind. And in your notes, the mythos beneath, behind, and through each religious narrative, right? Is that which we call that universal good, right? The universal good that transcends all religious narratives. That's what matters. What matters here, and what I want you to get, and what I don't want to be lost and stolen from you or from me, is that beneath it all, when you hear of Muhammad, and you hear of the Jewish heroes, when you hear of the Maccabees and the Maccabees, depends on how you say it. When you hear of the Maccabees, I guess, when you hear these things, well, did it really happen that way? It almost doesn't matter if it's Babylonian, Assyrian, or African, or nature religions and fables. It really doesn't really matter. Well, so what does it matter? Because if you're in a non-transactional view of God, where you have to get it right or else there's a price to pay, then now you can listen to the stories, you can listen to the ideas, you can engage with Genesis through Malachi, Matthew through Revelation, and you're not engaging in it to say, well, I'm accepting this is totally factual and it doesn't matter, and anybody that says it's not factual, you're accepting it and engaging with it to say, what is the mind behind the mythos? What is the mind behind the idea? So the mythos is that universal good, and that universal good transcends all religious narratives. That's what matters. In your notes here, and the worth, right? The worth of each narrative, the relevance or utility of each narrative is measured by what? How do I measure how useful the Hebrew scriptures are? How do I measure how useful the Vedas are? How do I measure how useful, how useful are these stories? How useful is the Quran? How useful is the Old Testament, the New Testament? How useful is it? Its usefulness, its worth, its relevance is measured by how faithfully it points people toward the big story. Its usefulness is how within the small stories we can get a nudging towards the big story. And I have it in the notes here, and increasingly, pointing us increasingly towards the big story, which is what? If we could say, well, the Old Testament, we would call it the Old Testament. I don't think that my neighbors would call it the Old Testament, right? We refer to it commonly, so we know what we're talking about. But what some people say, where the scriptures start and stop at Genesis and Malachi, other people say, well, yeah, you stop too early, and it goes a little farther. We're Christians. We believe that it goes past Malachi, but it ends in Revelations. And then a Muslim would say, yeah, and we believe that it didn't stop at Malachi, it didn't stop at Revelation, but there's more clarity on the God of Abraham. So we all have different ideas as to where it stops, but where it starts and where it stops is not the point. It's the mythos beneath it. It's that which within these small stories, some of which stop at Malachi, some of which stop at Revelation, some of which keep on going, some of which are being updated even today as Pope Francis gives, the edicts and the what do they call it? There's a name for it, but it's okay. Well, we've got the new information now. That's not the point. The point is how these things point us increasingly more closer and closer to the big story. That's what we're trying to get to when we talk about moving ourselves on from transactional religion. We're trying to move us on. We're trying to carry forward that which points us towards the bigger, but shed that which tethers us to the smaller idea. And how do these narratives do it? Catch this in your notes. The narratives of our individual religions, they have their own unfolding bigger and bigger perspective of an already bigger story. They have their own cosmicer perspective. So think of this. Paul, I've told you this before, Saul of Tarsus, right, did not convert from Judaism to Christianity. That is incorrect. That's a satanic idea. That's a contra Christ idea. Paul did not convert from being a Jewish person and says, man, I'm no longer Jewish, I'm a Christian. Well, I'm Jewish by nationality, or I'm Jewish by ethnicity, or by biology or genetics, but I'm no longer Jewish in mind. That's not true. Paul thought of himself as converting to a higher narrative or a higher perspective or a higher comprehension within the Jewish story. That he had always understood it one way, then he encountered Christ, and he said, I understand the story in a bigger way. He didn't move on and say, that story's dumb. He moved to bigger ideas about the story he had already known. That's a huge thought. That Paul's conversion wasn't from Judaism to Christianity. Paul's conversion was from one perspective of the story that he'd always understood to a higher way of looking at the story that he'd always understood. Which is why he constantly referred back to the Old Testament scriptures. He didn't refer to them as they were his source, because the living word was challenging the idea of circumcision. It was challenging the idea of clean and unclean food. The living word, Christ, was challenging the idea of clean and unclean people. And Paul is like, wow, the living word is telling me that the written word didn't have it all the way right. But yet he would constantly refer back to the written word to try to show how his ideas weren't that radical, but they were hidden there in the big story, pointing us towards the bigger story. I hope you're catching what I'm trying to say. Somebody say, I know this has a point. My God, it has a point. We're just trying to inch our way there. We're working our way across the universe, right? So narrative is the essence of how we understand and relate to the hope of the cosmos, the hope of all creation. Isn't this what it says in Romans, that even all the creation has a hope inside it for a future redemptive, a redemption, a redemptive arc, that the stars, the moon, my dog, everybody, all dogs go to heaven, right? Everybody knows that. Dogs seem to know that better than we do, but all dogs go to heaven. Not if they're Jewish dogs, not if they're Muslim dogs, certainly not if they're LGBT or whatever it is. That's a ridiculous idea. But all dogs go to heaven. But what about the rest of the world? Romans says that the rest of the world yearns to be liberated. The rest of creation yearns for its redemptive arc to be fulfilled. So it's a massive idea. And narrative is how we understand that. Storytelling is how we understand that. And what is the hope of the cosmos? In your notes, our hope is that this world, right? And maybe not the whole universe, maybe not the earth. We hope so, but maybe not. Maybe not the Milky Way, right? Maybe not this part of the galaxy, I don't know, or of the universe, but at minimum that we have an expected end. We hope that the whole universe has an expected end, but even if the whole universe isn't going somewhere good, we hope that we individuals have an expected end, that we individuals are heading towards some form of benevolent not yet, that there's a brighter day, which is why within all religions, right, what do they talk about? A future day of rest, or a future day of transmutation, a future day of higher living, of higher enlightenment, or maybe cycles thereof, working towards a Brahmanic kind of idea, right? We're working towards working towards a nirvana, that there's many incarnations and reincarnations, or there are steps and purgatories by which you learn and maybe pass on. But all the stories point to a not yet that we're hopeful for. That's the narrative, right? What is it? That the narrative should be pointing us to a clarifying, Omega, that one day, or even our songs, right? By and by, when the morning comes, we'll understand it better by and by. Like there's a day when I fly away, I'll understand it. There's an Omega end clarifying where I'll look back and I'll go, oh, it all makes sense. Why do we want it to make sense? Because deep down inside, we're following a story. We're following a story. What I'm trying to tell you is story is at the heart of the whole creation. Story and storytelling are at the heart of the entire cosmos. Where did it come from? That's a story. Where is it now? That's a story. Where is it going? Hopefully redemptive. That's a story. That's the story of the cosmos. And we're always looking to understand the story. We're always trying to figure out the story. There's the story of each religion. Where did it come from? How was its formulation redemptive from what was around? I mean, Abraham, the whole idea is that they're worshiping false gods and dehumanizing themselves. And out of that less big story, Abraham gets on another big story. That there's redemption and that we're not going to be corrupted and that we're not. Noah's a big story, right? It's like, well, the whole world is bad, but there's a good person and that good person will do what the bad world won't. And there's a story that we all have a story. And we believe that our religions contain the story, contain the hopeful end. And that we within it have our own story that has a hopeful end. Again, think of the title today. Think of what on your screen. The title we're talking about today is Finding Your Story Within the Story. Our faith is, all religious faith is, the story is heading somewhere, and we like to locate our story within it. So we have a loved one die. What happened? When they're in that next place, they're with the ancestors. They're now part of the cosmos. Why do we have this story? Because we have a story that we believe is hopeful. Right? Well, that's the problem with religion. They just invent these ideas. Religion didn't invent these ideas. This is not an invention of religion. It's the storytelling. It's the storytelling essence of what it means to be human. We seek story. We seek context. We seek to have a narrative. We tell ourselves. It's important that we know the narrative about ourselves. I tell you, sometimes I look at my life and I think my life is just falling apart. And I think, my God, I've screwed up everything. My mother told me, she says, you're the only person I know that can mess up a free lunch. Am I being too loud? You're the only person I know that can mess up a free lunch. And I think, thanks, Mom. The greatest thing ever told me, ain't first, you're last, right? But, I think sometimes, man, Mike, you used to be this, and you used to be this preacher, and you used to, do these churches, and you used to travel all over, and you used to be respected, and you used to be this, and now look at you, man. You're standing in your kitchen with only like 70 people between all the social media feeds even looking at you. Maybe over the next couple of weeks, 300 people even know anything that you said. What has happened to you, man? What did you do? You messed up everything. I mean, you're standing in your family room. You got you got workout shorts on, man, teaching around. I mean, what, you just fall into everything. And what happens? You start to believe that story, which is what? Man, is my ark not going anywhere? But what do? We try to find a place where we find a story. Uncle Jed leaves. You say, well, you know what? I got to find hope in it. Why do we have to? Because the hope within us corresponds and calls out to the hope within the cosmos. Hope against hope. Hope within hope. That there's a hope in the universe and a hope in us. And the stories we're drawn to and the stories we tell ourselves and the stories at the heartbeat of our religious narratives, the stories at the heartbeat of our family narratives, where we came from, where we're going, how we got here. That's why Ancestry.com is so huge. And that's why why? Because you want to track yourself within a story, but you want to track your story within story and how your story is creating story. And the heart of God, the heart of religion, the heart of cosmos, the heart of our very existence is stories. Within the big story, right? Within the giant true story, the one story, we find many cultural, tribal, regional, national, and territorial stories. The story of Israel, right? The story of Syria, the story of Iraq, the story of Egypt, right? We had a story of America. America when we called it America, original Americans, first Americans, indigenous Americans, crossing over during the Ice Age when there was land connection. I mean, who knows, man? It doesn't matter. The story of our gods, the story of our people, how we were chosen, how we had the visitation. I mean, who are the chosen people? The dark-skinned people, the light-skinned people, the blue-eyed devils, the hair like Moses and the hair of wool and the bronze skin. I mean, we're all trying to find a story. So within the big story, we have the smaller stories. And some of them are regional, some of them are cultural, some of them are national, some of them are territorial. This is our land, this is our space, that mountain, this is where the gods touch, this is where the earth split. We have a story. Our race, our skin color, our race is not a scientific word, but the story of our people, however you define our people or your people. And the big story has these sub-stories, but each of our stories contain and convey elements and aspects of the truth. Within every story, within the story of, you need to know who you are, as a black queen or as a black king, or, I guess you can't tell somebody they're a white king or a white queen or whatever, that'd be awful. But that's because power always shifts narrative, right? But you certainly can't say, isn't it obvious that white people are chosen? I mean, look around. Well, that's a stupid thing to say. But really, it depends on how far back you go, right? You go, where'd your people come from? Well, they came from Iceland. Where did they come from before that? Well, they came from this place. Where did they come from before that? Where did they come from that? We all came from the same place in Africa, right? We all came from the same place. Just depends on where we start the story or where the story is useful to help us find our redemption. So there's Roman stories about who Roman was and Romulus and Remus and how it was selected and how the Caesars got their power. There's a story, right? There's Greek stories. There's Hebrew stories. There's Vedic there's stories by which we find the origin of our tribe, our religion, our race, our family, the family of Israel. We have a story. That's what we're working on. And those small stories exist within the large story of what God is doing, the divine mind. And each of the small stories gives us a little bit of the aspects of the truth. It conveys, it contains, it highlights the divine mind within and around us. So as you hear the stories, you hear the Hebrew stories, it's supposed to show you a little bit of the divine mind, right? You hear the stories, the cosmic stories, it's supposed to show you a little bit of the divine mind. You hear the nature religion in the stories and how the rock and the sun and called out, and you hear the stories and how the rain and who sent. You hear the stories, and the stories are supposed to convey some parts of the divine mind. They're supposed to show us the divine mind around us. But while they're showing us the divine mind around us, they're simultaneously nudging our appetites and actions away from whatever perpetuates chaos, right? So the stories, listen to me, the stories are not just to show us the divine mind. The stories are to hopefully provoke in us the good and nudge us away from that which brings chaos. The Sumerian stories, the actual original Sumerian stories of Gilgamesh and the Odyssey quest for eternal life and the deception at the bottom of the sea, all these other kind of things, these are stories. Well, that's really close to our Adam and Eve story, kind of, but not really. But does it matter? Was it Gilgamesh quest or was it Adam and Eve? Does it really matter? What you got to listen to is not, well, which one is factually true? You got to listen to which aspects of the divine mind can I get out of either? So the story of Adam and Eve, right? You're in a garden. Don't overreach or you'll bring chaos in. Why do we have that story? Do we have that story factually? Is it actually out of the cradle of civilization? Is it actually out of the Fertile Crescent? Is that where we're supposed to be finding the actual story of creation? Is it scientific Adam? Is it mythical Adam? Is it historic Adam? Is that the cradle of civilization? Is that really like 6,000 years old? But the actual humanity where we were all nomadic and roaming, is that actually hundreds of thousands of years old? It doesn't matter, because within the story, what you're listening for, what did Pee Wee say? Shh, I'm listening for the mythos. I'm listening for something that highlights the divine, but highlights the divine what? And also nudges me away from that which commits or contributes to chaos. Consider, man, I hope you're paying attention. Consider the stories of the Greek gods, right? Zeus and Poseidon and Athena and Eros, right? And their soap opera. You could just pull up some popcorn. I had some delicious popcorn recently. You could pull up some popcorn, and you're like, man, we got to see what these fools are doing next today on Greek soap opera. Betrayals and lusts and affairs and usurpations and it's all there, and you're watching the gods, right? The gods must be crazy. Coke bottles flying out of planes, right? You're watching this stuff, and you say, wow, what's the point of the story? The point of the story is not really whether it's Zeus or really whether it's Athena or really whether it's Poseidon. That's not the point of the story. Dionysus. I mean, it's not the point of, well, they really were. I can't believe you don't believe in Dionysus. That's not the point. The point is, as you watch their dramatic soap opera and hear the stories of their betrayal and their aspirations and their pride and their humility and their service and their redemption, it's supposed to highlight aspects of the divine mind in our story. But it's not just supposed to show us a little bit of the light of God. It's also supposed to, by the moral of the story, right, point us towards a place where we don't perpetuate the chaos we see in their soap opera. Story. Religious story about gods within the big story that humans heard, the gods of Rome, the gods of Egypt, right? They're hearing what they demand of us, what they want from us. They want us to be better. And we do so in blindness, but we do so with an aim for some form of redemption. Consider the human soap opera within the Hebrew Scriptures. I mean, listen, I was just picking up the stories and shows and movies I'm going to create out of these things that I'm creating out of this book are better than anything that I mean, it's its own beautiful thing. I mean, the story of David itself, which has always been jacked up because nobody can do it without a stinking British accent, which we're not able to create any biblical stories at all, where everybody's not from, speaking the queen's tongue or whatever it is. The story of David and the betrayals and the thing. I mean, it's a human thing, and what he does right and what he does wrong, and how he compromises out of fear, but lets a person go, and that person's a murderer. How he believes the wrong person. It's a soap opera. Abraham, oh my gosh, he's this righteous dude, but now he's sleeping with the maid, and she's got a kid, and they're suing, and it's going to be bad, and he's got to get him out of here because he's got a great reputation in the neighborhood, and his wife can't stand it, but it was your idea. It's a story. And Noah's, oh my gosh, he's this thing, and now he's drunk, and his kids, and we don't know what it means, uncovered the nakedness. It could be that his dad passed out drunk with no pants on, but it could be incest, man. Nobody knows, and there's Lot, and Lot's dying, and his children carry his girls, and get him drunk, and get him pregnant by the father. I mean, my God, this is the craziest soap opera ever. It's not so that we can, unlike the Greek narratives where we watch the gods do their thing, we're like, the gods must be crazy, and this one we watch humans do their thing, and then we look to God and say, what do you think of that? And we make notes on what God thinks of it. And a lot of what we wrote down, what's God's response to that, is not true. It's Antichrist. God's response, he's going to kill the child. All right, adultery, got it. God's response, he's going to burn down the whole city. Adultery, okay. Homosexuality, got it. Oh, God's response is he's going to bring disease because got it. Okay. And we say, well, but it's not, is it factually true that God killed Sodom and Gomorrah? Is it factually true that God killed David's baby? It doesn't matter. We're supposed to listen to the mythos. We're supposed to listen to this. Wow. So when you murder and you lust and you let your lust and your greed, that you're total. So what does the prophet say to David? There was a guy and he had 1,000,000 sheep, and anything he wanted sheep. He wanted nice wool clothes, he had sheep. He wanted some lamb, he had sheep. He wanted some milk, he had sheep. Do people get sheep from milk? I don't know, milk from sheep. Doesn't matter. He had all the sheep he wanted. And then there was a poor dude, and the poor dude had one sheep. He loved that sheep. When it was cold, he brought the sheep in. The rich guy couldn't possibly bring 1,000 sheep in, and if it died in the cold, it didn't matter. So we lost 100. They were weak sheep. Natural selection selected them not to continue, right? And the guy loved the sheep. And guess what? The rich guy went and took the poor guy's only sheep. And David said, I'll kill the son of a... And he goes, you're the guy. What? Yeah, you took that guy. You got all these women lined up. You got Saul's women, the last king's women. You're the king. Everybody swipes right on you. And yet you went to the one guy who had true love that you didn't have. You stole it. Then you lied. Then you killed him. Then you covered up. And we're hearing the story. We're like, oh my gosh, I guess that's bad. Is it bad or not? And the God in the story says, yep, bloop, I killed the child. Okay. Did God really kill the child? Who knows? Did the child just die natural causes? A lot of times that happened. Who knows? Was there even a David? Who knows? But does it matter? Can we not get out of the mythos that we've got to not let our appetites encroach to the harm of other people? There's something of the divine mind, big story, embedded in each small story. No religious heritage or tradition points us perfectly towards the divine mind. And each religious tradition gives us a little and they take a little, right? Gives us a little insight of God, but also blocks some of God. Shows us, oh, I see the divine mind, but also hides. I mean, we say, well, I mean, the Greek stories, I can't believe you're comparing those Greek ideas to the true story of God in the Old Testament. I mean, those Greek gods were out of control. I got news for you, buddy. So was the God of the Old Testament, out of control. I mean, he's Elvis Memphis Mafia being held back backstage after a show. You see that guy that didn't stand up? I told everybody to stand up, and they didn't stand up. Mr. God Elvis, I think the guy was in a wheelchair. It doesn't matter. You're going to stand up at my show, man. You're going to stand up. Not mentioning any names, pointing any fingers, but you're going to stand up at my show, man, I swear. And Mo's like, just calm down, God. No, I'm going to kill every one of them. I'm going to kill everyone. Calm down, man. You don't want to do that, man. People think bad of you. And God's like, all right, it's working. Talk to me, talk to me. That's the way we present God in the soap opera. Or God's upstairs, watching the show, and he's sitting there. He's having he's been running the world for somewhere between millions of years and 6,000 years. He's upstairs. He's got a drink. He's running, and he sees something go down. He sees I don't know, somebody worshiping the wrong guy. Oh, that's it right there. And what are we going to do? God's coming down. What's he going to do? He's got to go. That reminds me, those people that didn't feed my people 400 years ago, let's go down and kill every single one of them. And we said, man, God's really out of control. The gods in the Greek stories are out of control. The God in the Hebrew story is really out of control. And I got news for you. The God in the Christian story is really out of control. So not any story. The God in the Muslim story, the Islam story is really out of control. All portrayals of God are out of control. All cosmic, karmic ideas of God. You didn't do this, so God will get you back. The gods are out of control. Or they're balancing each other out. Or they've all got flaws. But we're not supposed to tune in to hear the flaws of the gods and to perpetuate it. We're supposed to tune in to hear out. But what do? When we get too deep into transactional religion that it becomes weaponized, we start to treat things as facts that we need to only truly appreciate in their mythic context. What happens? It doesn't matter their actualness. Why? Because in every story that gives a little and takes a little, there's useful human, large self, image-seated self, good that we can draw from the Old Testament, the New Testament, from every religion, from every philosophy. There's good that we can draw from it, right? There's morals, there's lessons, there's the heartbeat narrative, regardless of their actualness. Think of Paul, right? You don't have to have this in your notes, but Paul goes to the Greeks and he says, I see your thing over here to the unknown God, and I see you worshiping all this, but come on, man, we're all in God's womb, right? I read this last week about the feminine of God, that when Paul says, in God we live, in God we move, in God we have our being, he was talking about a womb, that all the creation, that he was making a large idea that maybe everything we know about humanity, everything we know about the cosmos, is in the womb of God. But how could it be in the womb of God when God's a boy? God's just a boy in some of the stories. God only has a prostate in some of the stories. In other stories, God is a brooding hen sitting over the top of creation like a mother hen over her chicks. I mean, it doesn't, the facts, well, does God have ovaries or does he have a prostate? He has neither and both. God is a black woman with blonde hair and blue eyes. We can't be both. Well, God is both and neither. God is just as much a black woman as he is a blonde-haired, blue-eyed Jesus. It doesn't matter. But guess what? When you're trying to push a fact, to push a narrative that perpetuates inequality and chaos, you are co-opting now an idea, and you're burying the mythos deeper and deeper in the tribalism, deeper and deeper in the us-them, and the mythos gets lost, which is how we end up with a modern church that's so wrapped up in the conditional and tribal that it's lost touch with that which is universal and cosmic. Forgive me for cursing. Consider the gospel itself, and I have gospel in quotes in my notes. Now, I'm no fan of Hitler, and I'm no fan of transactional religion. I'm definitely no fan of the conditional gospel. But I want you to think for a moment, right, on the gospel story. And it's useful even if not entirely true actual strength, or it's useful even if not entirely actual strength. What is its strength? The strength of the gospel is the story. I mean, even if there was a price of sin that had to be paid, right? It could have been paid in private. I mean, you got to think about it. What if there was a special baby conceived and nobody knew? That baby was born and nobody knew. That baby was killed and nobody knew. And the price was paid and nobody knew. Well, it wouldn't really do us any good. Why would it do us any good? If we didn't have the story of what happened. Because the story is how we relate to it. I don't believe there was a price that had to be paid. I don't believe God is that petty, punitive, or retributive. I don't believe that at all. I believe that's an antichrist idea. I believe it's an anti-God idea. I believe I believe in the idea of shared original brokenness, but not shared original sin and a coming punishment. I mean, that goes against everything we see in Jesus of Nazareth. But let's just say there was a price that had to be paid. It can only be paid by a baby. God had to become the baby. So a woman gets pregnant and nobody knows how. She thinks it's her husband, but it really wasn't. And the baby is born, no one knows how. And then somebody comes along and kills the baby, and the blood is shed, and the price is paid, and it goes on. Okay, price said, what good would any of that have done us? What higher life would it have ever brought us to if it wasn't formulated into a story? What good would it have done individually, generationally, societally, or cosmically had the price been paid in secret? What it does individually is when I hear the story of what was done. How it redeems, and there's a redemptive arc generationally when I hear the story of transactional Christianity. There's something that happens societally when I hear the story of it. There's something that happens cosmically. Well, maybe not cosmically, I guess. You can't really do anything cosmically in transaction. We'll get to that. But listen, had it happened in secret, right? Had the gospel, and I call it the gospel. I don't really believe the sin price paid gospel. But had that gospel happened in secret, guess what? Humans would still have needed to invent a story about redemption. Why? Because the price being paid for secret and God no longer being mad and nobody knowing about it, we'd have to invent a story by which we can find ourselves on the side of God and other people are not, because we crave to relate to the story, the giant story, through our individual stories, because we all, at the micro macro level, survive by the stories we believe about ourselves. Going back to what I'm saying earlier, well, you were somebody and you've just fallen now and you're in your gym shorts doing a thing in your living room and nobody cares. If I listen to that story, then that story has no redemptive arc, but I have to tell myself another story. What's the other story? I have to tell myself this story, which is, you know what? I've always been a person that would drop everything and lay it all on the line to do what I believe God had put in my heart. And when I dropped out of high school and went to ministry school, I did that. And when I worked part-time just so I could be available to minister and to be at the church 7 days a week, I did that. And when I left everything and stuck down and started a church in my home, I did that. And when my church was going good and I left everything and I said, okay, God, I'll go, I did that. I'm the same person I've always been. Well, that's a different story. So we need to know our narrative. We seek to have a narrative. And guess what? Each of us tells the narrative to ourselves that is a good narrative. Why? Because it's how we track with what we hope to be the overarching narrative. That at minimum, I'm going somewhere. Even if everybody else is going to hell in a handbasket, I want to connect with the story that says, even on my worst day, there's still a redemptive element to my existence. That's the deep part of God. That the big story has a big ultimate redemptive mark, and that our little stories are tracking closely with the large redemptive arc. And at its highest ideal, catch this, I'll give you these 4 things, and we're coming to a close here. At its highest ideal, let me see what I got. No. Yeah, okay. Oh my gosh, we're really close. The big story has an ultimate redemptive arc, and we have little ones that track within us. Here's my last line of the day. I thought it was close. At its highest, catch this, please catch this. At its highest, our redemptive arc should be estimated 4 ways: individually, generationally, societally, and cosmically. That you're individually, generationally, societally, and cosmically, that if you want to tap into the big story and your little story within it, you've got to start thinking, what is the redemptive arc individually? What does redemption look like in my individual arc? I used to be a person out of control with my temper, but the more and more I get into the light of God, I'm more at peace. I used to prey upon people, but the more I do, now I look and I say, I'm not going to objectify people. I used to have bitterness and prejudice, but I'm not going to do that. So I used to be closed off and unavailable emotionally. What? You're looking for a story that as you progress through your arc, that it's moving you towards a better version of yourself. And generationally, what does generational redemption look like in this arc? How, when I'm done, will I have become a little bit better than where I came from and pass on something that's a little bit better than what I did? I'm trying to find a redemptive arc generationally. Guess what else we're looking for? A redemptive arc societally. We talked about it last week, how the future world, the future church, how the not yet is always pressing into the right now. Do you know in 1940, there was already a world in which there was already in 1940, there was already in America that black people and white people could use the same public facilities, the same restrooms. There was already America where black people had the right to vote. There was in 1880, there was already in America where women had the right to vote. In 1764, there was already an America where LGBTQ people had basic rights to health care and everything else. Somebody said that didn't exist back then. No. There was an America like that exists, and it was pressing its way into the America that would be is always pressing its way. The world that would be, the society that would be. What did Dr. King call it? The beloved community. The beloved community, this not yet place, is always pressing itself more and more into the right now place. Why do we believe that? Because we want to believe individually and generationally and societally we're inching to a place. There are still slaves. There's less slaves now today than less of a population is enslaved now today in the world than there was 150 years ago. Is it done yet? No. But there is a slave-free world pressing in upon us. Let me tell you, there's a murder-free city. There's a hunger-free America pressing upon us. I don't see it. It's the America that's not yet. It's pressing, trying to bring itself to bear through the prophets and the movements of individuals and generations. What are we doing? That individually we're bringing forth a redemptive arc. We're cooperating with the redemptive arc. Generationally we're cooperating with where my father and his father and his father and his father all died of alcoholism. But generationally, we don't die of that. And we don't pass that on, and nobody else grows up in that. What do? Generationally, we've had a redemptive arc, and maybe in those generational things, we'll have a societally redemptive arc that the world, Hartsfield Jackson. What was I? Andrew Young and not Andrew Jackson. What am I trying to say? Maynard Jackson, yeah. The world they died in is a different society they died in, or they'll die in, is a different society than they were born in. And that's the whole point. That the society that Harvey Milk was born in, we're in a different society. The society of today that's not there yet, but is more full of grace and understanding than it's ever been, that society is pressing in, but it's changed generationally. It's a society that's on a redemptive arc. But it's also a cosmos, and you're never going to get to a truly redemptive individual arc. You're never going to be able to align yourself with a truly redemptive generational arc in your home. You're never going to be able to connect with and advance a truly redemptive arc societally until you can accept that there is an arc that is redemptive in the whole of the thing. And you know what? Transactional religion, our believe this or else Christianity, can never get you to anything cosmically. Why? Because all transactional religion, that's transactional Islam, that's transactional Christianity, transactional Judaism, it doesn't matter. That all ideas of there's a good us and a bad them, and if we make the right choices, we'll be in the good, and those who don't be in the bad, anything like that can never get to a cosmic idea of redemption. Why? Because by very nature, it foresees who won't be included. But when we get into a cosmic idea that says everything, everywhere, all at once, is caught up in the big story, moving along a redemptive arc. Guess what? Society is caught up in that everything. And we can believe society can get better. As a matter of fact, our generations are caught up in that everything. And we can believe that there's a redemptive. As a matter of fact, we individually, and guess what? The more in tune we are with where God is taking the whole, the more we're able to leaven the societal, the generational, the individual with the universal underlying beneath, through and above and behind arc. And that is the essence of true religion. And that's what we should be connecting to. So the story of God becoming human and revealing for the first time, factual or not, how deeply you believe it. I don't believe it historically. I believe it. Whatever level you connect in it, can you connect with the divine narrative myth at the base of it, which highlights the good and points to the cosmic? And Paul has larger thoughts. He starts to rethink nations and genders and tribe and class. Man, I'm starting to think that God, he says that Christ is in all, above all, through all. Listen to the cosmic language. And you and I can't ever rise up to the full cosmic connection as long as we live in an us, them, believe this or else. But if we shed that believe this this or else, and recognize, my God, God's been doing it in all places, all times. The Greeks, the Jews, the Assyrians, the Egyptians, the Babylonians, the Sumerians, God's been at the work the whole time. There's always been a narrative from the let there be, from the in the beginning to the amen. There's always been an Alpha and Omega, and I'm awake to the cosmos. It alerts me to what can happen societally as I experience the redemption generationally, because it's rooting and living inside me individually, and that is what we're trying to move forward here in this nothing else matters world. That's all the time I got today. Listen, I hope you got something. If you're blessed, please consider supporting us financially. If you believe in what we're doing, if you're benefiting from it, you say, my God, you're everywhere today. I'm so caught up. It's so massive inside, and I want to bring it to you. But just please consider, this is our ministry. You know, you say, well, you used to be this and this. And all I am now is the same guy I've ever been. Okay, God, I think I'm seeing it bigger before, and I'm going to swing for the fences. And your support, your encouragement, your prayers, just whatever you can do. If you're like, you know, at the level that you can, and at the level that it's like speaking to you, just consider supporting the message and the messengers. This is our little family, and your support means more than I can ever say. You can reach us there, michaelandconnie.com/support. You can reach us on any of the apps, Mike Con LLC on Cash App, Mike Con LLC on Venmo. It's the way of the world now. I pay for haircuts that way. It's like everything is happening that way. It's really cool. Or you can write us 2870 Peachtree Road Northwest. That's Michael and Connie LLC. That's 2870 Peachtree Road Northwest, number 230, Atlanta, Georgia, 30305. All the information there on your screens, coming into your notes. 2870 Peachtree Road Northwest, Suite 230, Atlanta, Georgia. We get 1 or 2 letters a week. Means so much. We get, the Cash Apps and the Venmos a couple a week. Means so much. We get people to go on our website. It means so much. It means so much, because we're telling ourselves the story that we've not failed, we've not fallen, we've not messed up a free lunch. We've told ourselves a story. We heisted our sails higher, and it's caught us up, and we're no longer on the sea. We're floating above it, going, my God, this is crazy. We're on the front, and I got my arms around Connie, and we're like, we're the craziest people in the world. But guess what? Holding on to the ropes on the side of the ship, as you all saying, we got you, we're with you, means so much to us. Peace, health, light, protection, preservation, soundness, abundance, aboveness on each one, that the echo of the love of God would overtake that which I've said today, that it would tap you on the shoulder, spin you around, look into your eyes, and show you that there's good, there's an unfolding good that's been working, not just in our little part of the world or in those who are like us, but it's working in us individually and in all, and we're part and participant in it. Peace, joy, light, lightness, clarity, confirmation, override, usurpation, a divine swallowing of our smaller intention for the sake of the larger intention be upon each one. The ministry of angels, favor to and through. I declare it, I pray it, I release it in Jesus' name. God bless you all. Have a great and glorious week. I'll see you back here, same bat time, same bat channel, next Sunday at 10. We'll get back into this. It's really going to take a shift now to say, okay, how do I manifest this? How do I see my individual arc and generational arc? It's going to get good upon gooder. Peace on you. God loves you. We love you. And remember, nothing else matters.